Hey guys, John Cantera, the Double Broker Bounty Hunter here, and we have a new installment of our Transportation Fraud Prevention series. This is part 5, Double Brokering and Active Defenses. Uh, there's a distinction between defense and prevention that I'm going to make here. As you probably are well aware, we have covered a lot of what we're going to talk about today in past parts, but only in passing. This is kind of the consolidation of all those thoughts and recommendations into a single recording. So if you wind up dealing with a double brokered load, you've got an issue and you think that you're about to get one, you're about to book a load, you're about to post a load, and you want to make sure you're not falling victim, this is the one you want to watch. Before we get started, a little bit of a word from our sponsor at AccuBid Pro.
Do you know your cost per mile? Have you been hitting your profit margins? Do you struggle with bidding in a way that is both profitable and competitive? Would it be worth it to have all this information right in front of you? By calculating your cost per mile, AccuBid Pro helps you stay profitable in an industry still struggling to recover. In order to calculate your cost per mile, AccuBid Pro asks you questions about your business expenses. Our goal is to help you understand what you need to keep operating in order to keep up with the game and maintain your business. Enter your origin and destination, and we show you what you should bid based on your personal cost per mile in order to be profitable, even including a more detailed breakdown of each bid. Download the app today and get your 30-day free trial of AccuBid Pro, available on the App Store and Google Play. Bid smarter, bid faster, bid better with AccuBid Pro.
Okay, so let's go ahead and get into how to defend yourselves from these types of situations. Now, an important distinction to make here, defense versus prevention. Defense is when you're taking an active measure while you're conducting operations. You know, when you're getting ready to plan the load or the route and booking the load and all this fun stuff. That's really where the defense comes in. Where prevention is when we're dealing with procedural measures, training, contract prep, stuff like that. And we're going to talk more about that in part 7 of this series. But this part is going to focus solely on the defensive side. Because carriers, let's face it, especially if you're non-CDL, so you're running box trucks, hot shots, or something along those lines. If you don't have direct customers, of course, you're running off the spot market. And if you're running off the spot market, well, now you are dealing with instantaneous post and book. I mean, I find a good load for one of my box trucks that I dispatch for showing up on the board, and it's probably on the board for all of, if you're lucky, 30 seconds, and then it's gone. So you really have to be on your toes. You really have to be watching. So your dispatchers need to be in tune to what is going on, because let's face it, when these loads come up, especially operating in the spot market, you don't have 3 or 4 minutes to book the load. You have to book it now, because if you're not going to book it, the guy who's on hold behind you to that broker is. So you have to decide right then and there if you're going to take the load. That gives you no time to really screen the broker, especially if you've never used a broker before. So this module is going to help a little bit to give carriers and brokers some peace of mind as to the things they need to be watching for when they're actively working to book a load. Because let's face it, screening for a carrier usually takes place after initial contact, not before, you know, or during, you know, like brokers will. But carriers, you have the right and frankly the responsibility to vet a carrier vet a broker as much as a carrier can't talk today, as much as a broker has the right to vet you, Mr. Carrier. So keep that in mind. You know, we don't have, as carriers, the tools that most brokers have. We don't have Carrier 411. We don't have Highway. We don't have MCP or RMIS. So you start with Google reviews or reviews on the load boards like DAT or Truck Stop. Yes, all these reviews are full of passion and probably need to be taken with a very large grain of salt. But there's truth to pretty much every joke and whatnot out there. So, just throwing that out there. Check the reviews. If you have the financial means, I would subscribe to a screening service, something that gives you instantaneous snapshots of what the broker is about. Yes, Safer can give you that, can give you the majority of the information, but not all of it. Carrier OK is a good one. That's one that I use. Freight Validate, I also use. I like Freight Validate the most of all of them that carriers have access to, but that is, again, my 2 cents. Take that for what it is. I would also focus on a broker's credit. Their credit score is usually an indicator as to whether or not they have financial issues. And you don't want to work with a broker who's got impending financial issues. If a broker's headed towards collapse, then you're relying solely on the bond to get paid. And that is a process in and of itself. And we'll talk about how to deal with bonds later in the series. Here's an example of what a broker summary looks like on DAT. I chose a well-established broker to give you an example. We have a credit score of 97. Days to pay is 19. Those are 2 very important statistics. If the days to pay is greater than 30 or the credit score is less than 85, that's probably a broker you want to avoid. Also, that may be a broker that is not factorable. So you definitely want to double check that with your factoring company. Another very important key that I really want to point out on this particular screen, look at the star rating on DAT for this particular broker. It shows 75 reviews and 3 stars. That gives me a great deal of confidence. And let me explain why. When I'm taking my wife out to eat and I'm looking at star ratings for local restaurants, I'm looking for the 5-star restaurants. They have 4.8, 4.9. I'm happy. 4.5, they've got some service issues. How long ago was that? Or I might be looking for other information about it. When it comes to brokers, a 3.0 out of 75 reviews, I'm feeling very good about working with that broker, because let's face it, no matter what happens, someone's going to have a bad day and someone's going to throw a bad review against a broker. Does it hurt a broker very much? Not really. Okay, certainly not like a freight guard does against a carrier. But knowing that there are mixed reviews, and there are so many mixed reviews, tells me that this is a real broker. Whereas a lot of the scam brokers that you see out there may have 10 reviews, all of them 5 stars, saying they're the best thing since sliced bread. Bull dung. Okay. There's no freaking way. I see 2 or 3 reviews and all of them are 5 stars. I am very leery about working with that broker. Okay. That's just from my own experience. Take that for what it's worth. Here's a sample from Carrier OK that I also subscribe to. This is the same broker. And another thing that gives me good confidence is that their insurance, if you look on that second section there at the top, $7 million. And for those of you who know the regulation, how much insurance is a broker supposed to carry? They're supposed to carry a bond of $75,000. They got a bond for $7 million. That tells me this is not only a serious broker, this is a broker who knows their business, who is out there and properly insured to protect carriers in case things go sideways. I will work with this broker any day of the week and twice on Tuesday. So once you get that rate confirmation, that is your chance to really scrutinize what's going on. We talked about this back in part 3. Make sure you inspect that rate confirmation. You want to take a look at the contact info. Are you looking at a Gmail email address? Are there valid brokers that use Gmail? Yes, there are. They are few and far between. But if I see one, you better believe I'm already moving on to the next step. If it's a medium or a large broker, I'm already calling their corporate office. And I want to say, hey, is Joe Broker ABC at gmail.com a valid email address? Oh, yeah, old Joe's been with us for 20 years. He's never changed his email. He has one of our emails, but he still uses the Gmail one. But yes, it's valid. He's like, you want to, and I was like, okay, well, double check the load number and the lane for me. Everything turns out great. But I stopped and I called anyway. Because most of the time when you see a Gmail address, it's not a valid load. Just throwing that out there. If it's a small broker, you can't just sit there and call that broker again, especially if it's only one or two people in the office and that's all there is to the entire brokerage, because there are lots of brokers out there like that. Okay, you can't just call the same guy and say, hey, are you real? Of course they're going to say they're real. But if you have reason to doubt that, now you have to look for a different source. And the only available source is their customer, the shipper or the receiver. Call them. That is okay. You are allowed by law, by regulation, to contact the shipper or receiver to verify a broker. You are just as much as you're allowed to call a shipper or receiver to coordinate pickup and delivery. About the only time you cannot contact the shipper or receivers on a government load. In which case, yeah, you're kind of stuck dealing with the broker and you're going to have to rely on the hairs on your back of your neck or your spidey sense or whatever it is that's telling you something's up. Okay. Whatever you do, when you do talk to a shipper, be very specific about what you're asking for. Hey, I'm calling about this particular load. It's picking up at your place, going to this other site. This is the pickup number. Can you verify who the freight broker is? Done. Don't ask any more questions. Don't give any more information than necessary. Yeah, you can tell me your ETA. That's fine. But never get to a position where you're talking money. If the shipper sits there and says, hey, man, what are you getting paid to haul this load? Your response is, I am required by contractual obligation not to disclose that. If you wish to learn that information, you can contact the broker and ask them directly. End of story. Don't say anything about money to a shipper or receiver, ever. Because if you do, you enter into that gray area of back solicitation. We'll cover more about that when we talk about the sins of transportation, but avoid back solicitation at all costs, no matter what. Call them to verify the broker, call them to give them an ETA. That's it, nothing else. Scrutinize the hell out of that BOL when you've picked up, though. Make sure that the broker's name appears somewhere on the BOL, because that will tell you if they are in fact related to the load. And make sure you sign your BOLs. Talking a little bit more about this in section 7, but I cannot say this enough. When you pick up your load, sign your BOLs, the shipper copy, the receiver copy, the driver copy. Sign them all at the same time. That way, all the signatures are guaranteed to match. So if anyone is comparing documents along the way, when it's time to get paid, we can verify the documentation. Very important. In fact, for the clients I dispatch for, I require them by contract to have a stamp for all their drivers. And that stamp is going to include the carrier company name, the MC number, and the driver's printed name. And then the driver should sign and date underneath that in ink. As long as they're doing that on all pages, it is a very easy way for a broker to see, hey, wait a minute, looking at this carrier signature on this POD that I got, and it's a different MC number than what I booked the load for. Well, let's not pay this out. Let's figure out what's going on here. It's a security measure to help carriers, and it is extremely effective. So if you are a carrier and you are dealing with a typical double broker scam, here's how things play out. If you discover it's a scam before you pick up the load, guys, the best thing to do is just cancel the freaking load. Do you really want to go and pick up a load that you know is a scam from the start? I can tell you, no, you don't. Because in most cases, you're going to get paid less by the real broker than what the scammer has promised. So just cancel the freaking load. I will tell you that if you figure out who the real broker is, give them a call, give them a heads up, let them know. And that broker will have a great deal of respect for you when you try calling for a load with them in the future. If you discover it in transit, meaning the cargo is in your truck, on your back, and you are headed towards delivery, you absolutely are fighting against the clock here. You need to determine who the real broker of record is. End of story. And once you figure that out, you need to make contact with them and you need to ask instructions. Specifically, you need to know when and where that cargo is supposed to go. Okay. You could be headed to California based on a fake rate confirmation or a fake BOL that you got from the scammer. And the load may need to go to North Carolina. So you need to pay attention to those kinds of situations. And once you get that new rate confirmation, I don't care if you agree with the rate or not. And we'll talk more about this when we deal with responses to these situations in the next section. But no matter whether or not you agree with the rate confirmation, once you have one, you have a reasonable expectation of being paid. You must complete delivery. Just get it done. So I can tell you right now, and you're going to hear this on this part, the next part, and part 7. You're going to hear it over and over again. Both the carrier and the broker are victims. You are all losing money on this. It is about working together to mitigate the loss. So please make sure that you do that. If it is discovered after you deliver, you have a big problem on your hands, okay? Because you need to make sure that the real broker hasn't paid the scammer. Because if the real broker pays the scammer, do you think the real broker is going to want to pay twice? They're not. Forget the fact that they have a legal obligation to. Well, their customer has a legal obligation to. The broker has that obligation by extension. And this is an important legal distinction to make here. And I'll say it again when we talk about how the brokers handle these things in part 6. But you have vicarious liability, and that's the kind of liability the broker has because the broker did not properly vet the carrier that they booked on the load. So they have a liability and a responsibility to fix things. The shipper, by law, that's 49 CFR 377, has the obligation to make sure the real carrier is paid. So if the wrong carrier gets paid, then the shipper has the obligation to make sure the correct carrier is paid, even if it means them paying a second time, thus double pay liability. Now, again, if you're working with a broker, the broker typically assumes that liability on behalf of their customer. So the broker can, in fact, hold double pay liability as well. It all depends on how the shipper and broker contract read. Now, if we are dealing with an impersonation scam, you are typically dealing with cargo theft in most cases. Sometimes not. Sometimes it's a straight up double brokering job and the scammer is stealing just the freight bill. But in most cases, they're also stealing the cargo. Okay. Again, if it's discovered before pickup, cancel the freaking load. You don't want that headache. Okay. For example, you book a load, turns out to be an Amazon load. And for those of you who have been paying attention, you already know that Amazon loads are only booked on the Amazon app. So if you wind up with an Amazon to Amazon and it's an Amazon relay move, just don't get it. Cancel it. Now, if you can figure out who the real broker is, call them and warn them because somebody's trying to steal their cargo. And that broker needs to know so the broker can react appropriately. If load's already been picked up and it's on your back and you find out that it's double brokered and you may be an unwittingly helping a scammer steal a cargo, there's a couple ways to figure that one out. Is it a blind shipment? Now, blind shipments do exist. It does happen. You typically see it in reconsignment type cargoes. You see it in scrap cargoes, old equipment resale, things like that, because the shipper may not want the receiver to know exactly where the cargo originated from, or the broker may not want to, whatever. But the broker may give you a separate BOL than what the shipper gives you. Sometimes, in most cases, that is perfectly normal and perfectly legal. However, it is often a tool utilized to help steal cargo. So, when you are dealing with a blind shipment or you have a power only move, what I would do is I would keep a copy of the original BOL. I'd leave it in the truck. Don't give it to the receiver. You're not supposed to. They're not supposed to see the original BOL. They're supposed to see the BOL provided by the broker in a blind shipment. But I would keep that because that could be material evidence if the cargo is in fact being stolen. It is also a direct link back to the shipper if the cargo has been stolen also. So hold on to it. Don't just throw it out. But if you realize you're on a double brokered load and it was a blind shipment or it's a PO shipment, again, we need to figure out who the real broker is. Figure out who the real broker is, and then make sure that they are informed of what's going on and you get the right documentation for it. If it's discovered after it's delivered, now you've got the biggest problem you can have, Mr. Carrier. You're not going to get paid. You basically have assisted in the theft of a cargo unwillingly, but you did assist in the theft of a cargo. The broker had no idea about it. No one knows where it is. You are just completely hosed. You're not going to get paid at this point. Just keep that in mind. But figuring out who the shipper is and the real broker, you need to keep them involved and report the theft. That way, you're not actually accused of being the one who stole it. On the broker side, things are a little different. Now, brokers have something carriers don't. Compliance departments. I don't know of a single 510 truck carrier who's got somebody in-house that all they do is compliance. Aside from their safety guy and making sure that their DOT folders are intact, they sure as heck are not talking about screening brokers and stuff of that nature. Okay, all they care about is managing the driver pool. So brokers have this thing called a compliance department. And these compliance departments are basically risk management professionals who operate on legal advice to mitigate risks that brokers may face when it comes to giving loads. So when a broker sits there and talks about these different requirements that they have for carriers, it's because of these guys. These compliance guys are the ones who tell the broker, you can't use a carrier unless they have A, B, and C. Okay, and they utilize different tools to come up with what those A, B, and C situations are, whether it's going to be pulling stuff from different vetting sources, stuff out of Safer. It comes from a whole variety of places. Lately, you're seeing things from like Highway, My Carrier Portal, RMIS. And the real pain is when the information is incorrect. Because if the information is incorrect, carriers, well, of course, you want your information to reflect correctly. These brokers do not have the ability to change any of those screening platforms. So you really have to go to the source and get it corrected at the source. There are ways to do that. You can always reach out to me and we can walk you through how to take care of those kinds of situations. But those compliance departments, they carry the power. Because ever since 2022, it's them who keep protecting brokers from the scammers. Prior to 2022, you have the brokers utilizing their own intuition, their gut feeling, their spidey sense, whatever, and relationships in order to award loads. And frankly, since then, they could have had a 10-year relationship with a carrier, but if they don't meet that compliance department's requirements, that relationship's dead. It's a shame, but that is the world that we live in. So some of the things that a broker is going to use when the shipper or when a carrier calls on a load, they're going to screen the carrier using these quick reaction sources. carrier 411, carrier assure, the highway, all these others. They're going to go through those to do a quick initial check to make sure the MC is in good condition. And if that goes okay, well, now they might dig a little deeper into the safer information. That's the information that DOT has on all the carriers. One of the things that I recommend is checking the latest MCS 150 update. Now, they're supposed to be updated every 24 months. More often if you increase or decrease the size of your fleet. Annually, if you're reporting the mileage from previous years, if you're updating contact information, whatever. But if it's a recent MCS 150 update, I would ask the carrier why they did an update and what did they change. If it's contact information, I would dig a little deeper. If it's just to update their mileage and stuff and everything looks okay on Safer, you're probably all right. But, it's always a good idea just to keep looking at these things. I also recommend looking at the insurance and authority history. A lot of brokers require minimum 1 year of active authority. And when you are doing your annual renewal of your insurance carriers, sometimes your insurance agent is slow in getting the filing back to FMCSA, in which case your authority may lapse for a day or two. Well, it can be seen in Safer if there was a lapse and how long that lapse is. Most brokers are not going to complain over a lapse of 5 days or less. Okay, if it's more than that, then you may have some problems. But if you're in the middle of renewing your insurance, you need to stay on top of your insurance agent and your Safer listing to make sure your listing updates quickly and correctly. Otherwise, your authority can get shut down administratively until those issues are fixed, and that will hurt you in the long run. But brokers, I would be looking at that history to make sure that, well, the history is contiguous. It's a layered defense. Brokers have to have that layered defense. Remember, I said earlier, carriers have seconds to vet a broker in order to determine whether or not they're going to take a load. Brokers have far much more time and more information at their fingertips at trying to resolve whether or not they want to work with a carrier. Okay, so using these monitoring sources is a way for a broker to expeditiously review a carrier's statistics to determine whether or not they're good. They use things like predictive analytics to determine whether or not a carrier is going to be successful. I don't buy the predictive analytics piece myself. Just because a algorithm says I'm 99% successful doesn't mean anything. Every load's different. Every load is its own situation. So who cares? What you really want to know is the carrier real? So I would much prefer an objective source of information versus a subjective source of information. Just saying. What I really like about some of these layered defenses nowadays are the security protocols that exist. Almost every single platform, RMIS, MCP, Highway, they all have multi-factor authentication going on. And that multi-factor authentication reduces the risk of a scammer obtaining credentials of those systems on behalf of the broker and then changing things. So multi-factor authentication, as much of a pain in the ass as it can be, is a very good thing in this environment. Those verification codes, it is absolutely imperative, need to go to a specific source and only one source. That is the owner of the account or to your compliance team. Only. That way, when you go to log in, call compliance, I need the code. Boom. You got the code. Now you're logged in. You're good to go. That way, no one is stealing your info. No one is stealing your access. You have to protect it because that is where impersonation comes in. Broker compliance also has the ability to override some criteria. They may require a year of authority, but there's 5 minutes left in the day. You only have one truck that's in range to make the pickup, on time. They may use operational necessity to bend the rules a little bit. Okay. So don't get me wrong. None of this stuff is set in stone. It all depends on each individual broker. I have often seen MC maturity as a discriminator, safety records as discriminators, and these are important and verifiable things. But if you discriminate on those, ask some questions as to why those things are happening. You might be surprised. Now, once a broker does approve a carrier, this is where things get really good. We see a lot of requests for verification of different things. The most common is a picture of the truck with the signage or the VIN number or something along those lines. And certainly the broker's going to want the driver and truck information. Always are going to want that. And that's a good thing to have. You know, whether they want the driver's phone number to send them tracking, or they want the driver's name so that the shipper can match the driver's name when they show up, all sorts of things. Tracking is another very good defensive tool that brokers use, and they do that on behalf of the shippers or the cargo owners, because let's face it, you're hauling $100,000 worth of cargo, and somebody is very concerned about that money and wants to make sure it goes to the right place. So they've got a right to know where their cargo is. If you're one of those old school guys out there who are very concerned about your privacy and you want to reject tracking requests over privacy, you probably need to get out of this industry, because these tracking requirements are not going away. They will not go away. And because we're dealing with somebody else's money, you need to be willing to accept that. Another proper defense is proper BOL construction. Brokers, if you do not put the real carrier's name on the BOL, then there's nothing for the shipper to use to screen. There's nothing that the carrier themselves can use to screen. When I was a carrier and I made a pickup and I saw carrier ABC was listed in the carrier section on the BOL, I stopped and I called the damn broker. Said, what is this? I talked to the shipper. What is this? My name is XYZ. XYZ, it better be on this piece of paper. Redo it or unload my truck. I don't care which. That BOL needs to be written properly, because you also face liability issues. If the real carrier is not listed on there, the real carrier has an accident and their insurance denies coverage because they're not listed on the BOL, Mr. Broker, you got a problem. And that's not something you should turn around and freight guard the carrier for because you wrote the BOL wrong. Throwing that out there, guys. There's a reason why these rules exist. And of course, the best defense I have ever come across, and the only way to guarantee that the right person has the cargo, is utilizing the shipper for verification. The shipper has got to double check and look at the side of the truck and make sure that it's going to the right carrier. If they don't do that, it's the Wild West. And you better believe that shipper's going to turn around and blame both the broker and the carrier when it's wrong. Please train your shippers. That's it for this particular section. If you need help dealing with a double brokered load, or you're dealing with some kind of a scam situation, broker, carrier, shipper, don't care who you are. If you need help, reach out to the Double Broker Bounty Hunter. I am here to help anytime. My email, jcantera, vigilanttransport.com. Phone number's on the screen. My website's on the screen. All you got to do is reach out. The worst thing you can do when you think you've got a problem is to stay silent, because somebody's not going to get paid, or somebody's going to pay double, or the cargo's going to get stolen. Speak up. This is not a matter of pride. This is a matter of getting paid for everybody. Stay safe out there, and whatever you do, don't let scammers take you for a ride.